Hi there, it's Christy with the Chirp YouTube channel. I hope you're having a wonderful day. I certainly am. I'm happy to be here talking to you today, and I would like to talk about how we teach kids basic vocabulary. I'm going to speak today to the families and professionals who work with kids who have developmental delays and disorders. But if you have a child who is typically developing, this video will be helpful to you too. And in fact, your child should learn even quicker using these strategies. My first recommendation is use sensory experiences. Sensory experiences are what enable children to stay calm and to stop trying to scratch that sensory itch that they have. Check out the video right up there for more information about sensory needs and how you can meet them in your home or your classroom. If you have a child who needs more vestibular input and not having it feels like an itch that he can't scratch, we need to provide it. And we can teach words during this process. So what I would do with this child is go to a park or the swing set in the backyard or the swing in my classroom or the swing in the child's room and move the child through space. This is what a child who needs more vestibular input needs. He needs to be moved through space. He needs that feeling of shifting in space with his body. We can do it on a slide, we can use a swing, we can use a trampoline, we can use a little cart that has wheels on the bottom and push it all around. And as we're going, we think of ways to incorporate basic vocabulary into the activity. So when we're swinging, I stop and I look with expectation and I wait. I model for the child what I want him to say in order to start pushing him again. Maybe it is swing. I'm not going to use the words more or please because kids learn these words and then they use them for everything and they're not very distinct. They don't really mean anything in themselves except I want more of whatever it is that I want. They don't really describe very well exactly what the child wants. So I would use an actual noun or a verb that I want the kid to use, which would be either swing or push. Both of those would be appropriate in this case. So I say swing and I wait with expectation, happy expectation. I'm excited at what the kid's gonna say. And maybe he just looks at me the first time and he's not a kid who really does eye gaze, but he looks at me and I say, oh, swing! And we swing some more. And then I wait and I pause and I wait until he looks at me again. If the kid is able to maybe start saying a word, oh, swing! Okay, swing! Repeat the word tons and tons of times because we all know that repetition is the mother of learning. This is a phrase I learned when I took Russian many, many years ago in high school. My teacher taught us one of these little Russian phrases every week when I was taking Russian, and that was one of them. In Russian, I believe it would be something like "Повторение мать учения," which means repetition is the mother of learning. I don't know why I remember it all these many years later. But I do, and it's very true, and it's especially true and meaningful to kids with disabilities and delays. They need to hear it more times before it comes out the way that we want to hear it. You can think of many other things that you can teach using sensory experiences. Teach major nouns and major verbs. Just start out with 5 of each. So usually for the verbs, I teach things that the child himself does. So sleep, eat, jump, run, swim, perhaps. Now that summer's coming up, a lot of our kids here in Arizona are going to be wanting to swim. So you pick maybe 5 of each that you're going to repeat heavily and find lots of ways to repeat. And those are the words that you work on first. Of course, you don't stop the child from producing other words, and if other words come up that are appropriate, then you add those to the list. And maybe you leave off one that doesn't actually come up that much in real life and is maybe going to be for a later list of words. Along with number 1 is number 2. We need to follow the child's lead. What I did when I worked with children in their homes was I came in with a communication book that had in it the toys that were in my car that day and other activities that we could do at the child's house. I chose to bring equipment with me because I never know what's going to be available in a client's home, but also because my toys were especially interesting to the children because they didn't have the same toy at home. So they were especially engaged with me because I had new and interesting toys that were way fun. I brought the book in. I helped the child to request what it was that he wanted to play with first. Usually a session would start out with a sensory toy first, and that's all up to the child. If the child did not want a sensory experience, then we did not have one right then. But let's say the child said, I want penguins, please. I go out to the car, I get the penguins, I bring them in. When the child is losing interest, when the child is starting to sort of not attend to the penguins anymore, seems to kind of have lost interest, I have a little card in the corner of the communication book that says, all done. So I take the child's hand and I point to all done penguins, and then I direct him back to the communication book to choose a new activity. And so through the space of a 50-minute session with a child, I would usually go through anywhere. Sometimes the child was very focused and just wanted to play with one thing, but I can't remember a session in which I didn't go back to my car at least twice. Sometimes it was significantly more than that. So I usually ended up being pretty sweaty because here in Arizona, it's really hot. And today, believe it or not, it is right now 108. This is the first day that we've had that it's been above 105. So it's quite a shock. I'm trying to stay indoors as much as possible. But obviously going in and out to my car was pretty warm sometimes. So if you are inside and you can just pick a different toy off the shelf, be thankful. That is a good example of following the child's lead. If the child cannot engage with a certain activity any longer, move on. Teach the same stuff with a different activity that the child is able to engage with and enjoy. Number 3 is follow the child's interests. For example, one time I was going to a new client's house. I didn't know what this child's interests were, but I happened to bring in the penguin toy with me. And when the mom opened the door, she burst into a smile and said, "My kids love sea animals. The fact that you have penguins is the best thing ever." And this mom was completely won over, as were both of her kids, both of whom had a diagnosis of autism, just because the toy that I brought matched some of their interests. If you can figure out a way to use a child's interests as an opportunity for engagement, any opportunity for engagement is an opportunity for learning. No matter what you're trying to teach, you can do it through an interested engagement that a child has in the activity. So I was able to teach all sorts of communication skills using that toy. And once I found that out, of course, I was able to come up with many more toys and books and much more equipment that also was sea animal based. And those kids ended up being some of my very favorite kids ever, and their family is adorable and wonderful, and I miss them a lot now that I'm not doing in-home therapy anymore. Find ways, if at all possible, to use a child's interests to lure him or her into a relationship with you, into an engagement with you, and then teach. Once you have grasped that attention and that engagement, that's what you exploit in order to teach the child, and exploit in a positive way. As we're teaching one word at a time, keep in mind that number 4, we want to do what I call +1 talking. So think about the level at which the particular child you're thinking about is communicating currently. If she is using 0 words, nonverbal most of the time, then you don't want to use more than 1 word at a time in a clump. Not because the child can't understand more than 1 word, but because we know she can't produce more than 1 word at a time yet. I want my model to be reproducible for her. I don't want to spew out a 4-word sentence because that is not something that she's going to be able to replay in her head or re-say with her mouth. And what I say, I want the child to be able to use as a model, as a prescription for her own language. And if my language is too complex, her brain and her muscles can't repeat it. And so it's much more difficult for her to learn. If the child is speaking 1 word at a time, then I want to do a stretch goal for her. I want to speak 2 words at a time so that she can get used to that next level of difficulty. This is what I call +1 talking, and you should always be thinking about this when you're working with a child, whether it's your own or whether it's a client. What level of language is the child currently using? I can use 1 step up from that because I want to be a model, a challenging model, but not an impossible one. My next tip is repetition. Once we have the words picked out that we want to really reinforce over the next time span, we need to use them in as many different ways as we can. In speaking, in visuals, in playing toy house, in playing cars, in doing sensory activities, in doing art. All of these different areas, I need to be using the same phrases as much as possible to get in that repetition. The next tip is pair visuals with the words, with the verbal words as much as possible. So if I'm teaching jump, it's a really great idea to have a visual of jump, maybe a digital picture of the child jumping or you jumping or a Boardmaker picture of jumping. I'll put links to Boardmaker down below. There's an online version that's pretty cheap, and then there's a CD version that is less cheap, but you can choose either of them or neither of them. A digital camera works just great. When you say jump, when the kid is jumping, you hold up the picture and say, jump, jump. When you're swinging, you hold up the picture and say, swing. These things kind of converge the pathways in the child's brain and bring the action and the verbalization to be one and the same thing in the child's brain. Whereas otherwise, the verbalization doesn't necessarily link up quite right with the action and with the visual of what's happening. So the more we can bring those all together, the more effective it will be and the easier it will be for our child to learn. My next tip, and these are not really in order of importance, but my next tip is build trust with the child through a relationship. I need the child to trust that I am not there to be a boss of him. I am the boss because I'm the adult, and kids need to know that there is an authority structure and they need to manage their behavior when possible. But I'm also there in this instance to be a play partner. I want to know what the child is experiencing. I want to know what the child's wants are, because I know that the child can learn better through doing things that are intrinsically interesting to her. I want the child to trust me. I want the child to know that when I come over, I'm going to care about what she cares about. I want the child to know that I'm not going to let her hit me or kick me, but I am going to let her have emotions and feelings, and I'm going to help her sort through them and learn to be a grown-up kid. And I care enough to make that happen. I'm safe, but I'm also an authority figure. And there's a really comforting sense of safety and trust that children have when an adult can be both of those things. My next tip is play dumb. A lot of parents, especially mothers, and a lot of professionals meet a child's needs before the child even has a chance to experience any sort of lack. So a child is playing or walking around and a mom hands them the sippy cup or just a drink and says, time to drink. Or a child comes in the kitchen wanting a drink and the mom says, oh, you want a drink? Here you go. Both of these things are very nurturing and very helpful. However, they're not helpful because they're preventing the child from ever expressing, I need a drink, I want a drink, please. We need to let our kids express themselves. We need to let our kids figure out what it is that they need and initiate requests for it, whether it's verbal or not. Using the communication book is just fine if it's not verbal. That's still initiating, that's still requesting. It's just in a different manner. We need to let our kids do that. We need to let our kids need their toys, which are up too high for them. If a child stands in the middle of the playroom and reaches up to the Legos and I know that's exactly what he wants, I'm not going to say, oh, okay, you want Legos? Here you go. I'm going to look at him and I'm going to wait. And I might provide him with a communication book. And I might say, dolls? Marble Run? I'm going to play dumb. I'm going to pretend that I have no idea what it is that he wants because I want to give him the opportunity to get better at communicating, to initiate communication. Too many of our kids are provided for all the time because we know that they have special needs and it's hard for them, so we want to make it easier, which is very nurturing and very normal to do. And it was very hard for me to break that habit. And very many of our kids learn how to respond to questions, and they do not learn how to initiate a communicative event. So if I say, what do you want? Or do you want Legos? The child might say yes, or Legos, but the child has a very difficult time jumping over that hurdle, that initial hurdle of creating a circle of communication with me, being the first one to communicate. And I need to make that happen all the time. I need to put the child in circumstances where I can support him to initiate communication. That's very important. So play dumb, put toys high up out of the kid's reach so that he has to ask. Keep the cupboards locked so that he can't just get his own snack. Keep the fridge locked. Put a hook on the fridge so that he can't just get his own juice. Make sure that the doors are locked because that's safe. But in every circumstance, be a bit of a saboteur and make your child ask for things rather than just getting them easy peasy. My next two kind of go together. I'm going to say that the second to the last one is be flexible. If the child is having a rough day, is there any reason we can't teach via sensory activities? Is there any reason we can't work on talking through whatever it is that has caused the problem if the child is at that level? Brainstorming together how we might feel better and how the child could maybe help himself to recover. Everywhere a child could be, emotionally, physically, we can get our fingers in there, we can engage with the child, and we can be productive, we can teach something, unless it's a red alert. And in that case, check out that video up at the top to see what to do in cases of red alert. My last one is, and I'm going to put, say, be flexible, the one right before this, but hold the child accountable for what he says. What I mean by this is if a child says, I want penguins, you go get the penguins, and the child says, no, no penguins. What you do is you say, penguins, you said I want penguins. We're going to play with penguins for 5 minutes, and then you can pick something else. But you said penguins. Words have meaning. A child needs to learn that. He can't just say random words and expect that you're going to treat them as if they're meaningless, because words are not meaningless. All words have meaning. Treat them that way. If a child is doing repetition of movie talk, treat those things like they really mean things. Treat the child's words as if they have meaning. Hold him accountable for what he says and make things happen that he says he wants to happen. I hope these tips were helpful today. I will be back with another video for you very soon on a similar topic, because I think this is a topic where people get very confused. Yes, we want to teach our kids. We want them to learn better how to communicate, how to use more words, how to be more interactive. We just don't know how to do it. And so these are some tips that I think might help you as you think through how you actually want to teach and what you want your child to know. Leave questions for me in the comments section down below, and I'll see you in my next video. Thank you for watching. Have a great day. Bye.